Hello everyone. Today, I'd like to show you my super easy, beginner-friendly skin coloring process for illustrations. At the end, I'll also share a quick skin rendering process that I use for webtoons. In this video, I will focus only on coloring the skin. I'll start with a basic sketch and leave out the hair and clothes. My first step in coloring the skin is choosing the base skin tone and the undertone for my character. I usually categorize skin tones into 3 basic types: warm, cool, and olive. This will be important in a moment when we decide which colors to use as the base for the face. The key to painting more realistic skin is understanding that skin contains far more colors than we might think. If you look at references or classical paintings, you'll notice that areas with more blood vessels, such as the cheeks, ears, and elbows, tend to appear redder or pinker. The forehead often has a more yellowish tone, while the chin and neck may contain hints of blue. These colors can vary depending on skin tone and undertone. Let's start with a very fair, cool-toned skin. Before I start coloring the skin, I block out the area of the face to make the process easier later. I will do it in a new layer under my line art layer, with G pen, and simply coloring the whole face. Since I already have a color in mind, a very light peach, I'll use it as my blocking color. Of course, you can use any color for blocking. I often use vibrant colors like red to help spot any gaps. However, since this is more of a study, I'll be a bit less precise. Once I'm done with the blocking, I'll go to the layer panel and press Lock Transparent Pixels. This will allow me to paint only within the already colored area. Since I'm working with a cool-toned skin, I use cool-toned red, yellow, and blue for the face. I paint these colors loosely with a skin brush I downloaded, but you can also use the default watercolor brush, or even a low opacity G pen, since we'll blend this part out later. I know the initial instinct might be to use an airbrush for skin and hair, but it can sometimes make the painting look too mushy. After I've applied the color, I'll blend it out a bit using the soft mix blender. Next, I'll create a new layer above the locked skin layer, but below the line art layer, and then I'll press Clip to layer below. This allows me to paint only within the already blocked in area. Now, I'll use the skin color I originally decided on with the skin brush, adding more layers, and blending both this new layer and the one beneath it. You can also lower the opacity of this layer slightly if needed. The goal is to find a sweet spot where the colors we initially added subtly show through, creating a more natural skin tone on a new layer. I'll add blush using a low opacity airbrush to the chin, cheeks, and ears, as these areas have the most blood flow. And with the same airbrush, a hint of purple around the eyes and chin. Skin can also reflect the colors of the background. So, if you have a bright red or green background, you can add a tiny bit of those colors to the skin as well. For shadows, I always use multiple layers for both darker and lighter shadows. I prefer using a grayish-purple color with multiply mode. A helpful tip that can make a big difference is to avoid using the airbrush for shadows. Instead, I recommend something with a sharper edge, like the G pen, to achieve a cleaner look, and then blending out the necessary edges later. I tend to use cooler shadows and warmer lights in this piece, but I'll show you the opposite technique on a darker skin tone. It can depend on the surroundings, though. A good tip to keep in mind is whether the light is coming from inside or outside. Indoor lighting tends to be more yellowish, so cool light may look odd in those cases. Lastly, I add some soft light to the most prominent parts of the face where the light hits. I'm following the same process for the darker skin tone, but this time I use warmer base colors, a warm brown for the shadows, and blue for the lights. I also use more light placement in this illustration, because darker skin tends to reflect light more. With this easy process, you can even paint fantasy skin colors, like blue. My only tip is that as long as your character has blood in their body, don't forget to add a red, pink, or orange blush in the right areas. As an extra tip, I'd like to show you my super easy webcomic skin coloring process. I start by adding the basic color for my character with a G pen, aiming to avoid any gaps. Then, I add blush to the cheeks, ears, chin, fingers, and elbows using a low opacity airbrush on a different layer. Next, I add the shadows on a separate multiply layer using a purple-colored G pen. Finally, I add highlights with blue to quickly mimic the same face undercolors we did earlier. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Have a nice day.